Far beyond the bright trade routes of the core systems, where the stars looked dim and tired, a mining colony floated near a dying red sun. The station was called Karath 9, though most workers simply called it the Chain, because once someone arrived, leaving felt impossible. Massive metal rings surrounded the station, holding mining platforms, cargo docks, and living quarters that glowed faintly against the endless darkness of space. Many species lived there, but none truly belonged. The corporation that owned the station controlled everything: food, air, housing, and work. Contracts decided who lived well and who struggled. Numbers ruled more than kindness. Among the thousands of workers was Lyra, an alien mother from a peaceful ocean world. Her people were known for their soft voices and calm nature. She had once lived among clear waters and bright skies, where families gathered in harmony and children were celebrated as gifts of life. That world felt very far away now. Lyra had come to Karath 9 with her mate, hoping to earn enough credits to rebuild their damaged home after a natural disaster. The corporation promised good wages and safe conditions, but shortly after their arrival, her mate vanished during a cargo accident. The company called it an unfortunate loss and added new processing fees to her account. Instead of earning freedom, she fell deeper into debt. Every day, she worked long shifts sorting mineral samples and cleaning heavy equipment. Her hands were often sore, and exhaustion weighed on her shoulders, but she endured for one reason alone: her child. Her baby, small and fragile, slept in a cradle made from recycled materials. Lyra sang gentle songs from her homeworld whenever she returned from work. The melodies were soft and flowing, carrying memories of oceans and sunlight. Other workers sometimes paused outside her shelter just to listen, finding comfort in sounds that reminded them of better places. Debt notices arrived regularly. At first, Lyra believed she could repay everything if she worked harder. She accepted extra shifts, skipped rest cycles, and used fewer resources to reduce costs. But the numbers only grew larger. Hidden fees appeared without explanation. Housing charges increased suddenly. Even medical checkups added new penalties. She began to understand that the system was not meant to be fair. Despite everything, she stayed hopeful. She believed someone would notice the unfairness and help. She believed rules existed for a reason. One morning, as artificial sunlight slowly brightened the worker district, Lyra sensed something was wrong. The corridor outside her shelter felt tense. Conversations stopped abruptly when security drones passed. Workers moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. A loud chime echoed through the area, the sound of official enforcement. Lyra's heart tightened. 3 corporate enforcers approached her door. Their armor was smooth and cold, marked with the company's symbol. Behind them floated a small drone projecting a glowing contract display. She opened the door slowly, holding her child close. The lead officer spoke in a neutral tone, as if reading from a script. He announced that her account had reached default status. Payment deadlines had expired. According to Contract Clause 72, the corporation had the right to claim alternative collateral. Lyra did not understand at first. She asked quietly what they meant. The officer's answer felt like a storm breaking over her. Her child would be taken to settle part of the debt. The words seemed unreal. She shook her head, trying to correct him. She said she would work more, accept harder jobs, do anything. The officer simply pointed at the contract projection, highlighting legal language she could barely read. Children taken under this system entered corporate training programs. Everyone knew what that meant. They would grow up working for the company, bound by contracts they never chose. Lyra felt her strength fade. She begged for more time, her voice trembling but desperate. The officer remained calm, almost bored. The decision had already been processed. The transfer would occur at noon. After they left, silence filled the small room. Lyra sat on the floor, holding her child tightly. She whispered promises she was not sure she could keep. Tears fell quietly as she tried to think of a way to stop what was coming. Outside, word spread quickly. Workers whispered in corners, sharing worried looks. Many felt sympathy, but fear kept them still. The corporation controlled everything. Anyone who resisted risked losing even more. Among the rumors was talk of a human who had recently arrived at the station. Humans were rare in this sector. Stories about them were mixed. Some said they were brave, others said reckless. Some claimed humans cared too much about fairness, even when it made life harder. No one expected one human to change anything. Time moved slowly toward noon. Lyra packed a small cloth with the few items she owned, a toy made from scrap metal, a soft blanket, and a small crystal from her homeworld. She wanted her child to have something familiar even if they were taken away. She sang again, though her voice shook. The melody filled the room like a fragile shield against despair. As noon approached, footsteps gathered outside. Workers stood at a distance, watching silently. The enforcers returned, accompanied by more drones and a transport unit waiting to receive the child. The lead officer stepped forward. Lyra held her child tighter. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Just as the officer reached out, a new voice spoke from behind the crowd. "Hold on!" The word was calm but clear, cutting through the tension like a beam of light. Everyone turned. A human man stepped forward. He wore simple travel clothes and carried a small data tablet. His face looked tired but focused, and his eyes moved carefully, observing everything around him. The officer frowned. Humans rarely interfered directly in corporate matters. The man introduced himself as Daniel Hale. His tone remained polite, almost casual, as if he were discussing a minor delay rather than challenging authority. He said he wanted to review the contract. The officer laughed softly, saying the process was already complete. Daniel nodded as if expecting that answer. He activated his tablet, projecting legal files into the air. Lines of text scrolled rapidly, highlighting sections few workers had ever seen. Daniel pointed out inconsistencies, fees added without authorization, clauses conflicting with interstellar labor laws, and penalties that violated universal child protection agreements. The crowd stirred with surprise. The officer tried to dismiss him again, but Daniel remained calm. He asked precise questions, forcing the officer to respond publicly. Each answer seemed to reveal another flaw in the system. Lyra watched with disbelief. This stranger stood between her and the corporation without fear. Security drones adjusted their positions, scanning Daniel. He did not move away. Instead, he continued reading from the contract, explaining the rules in simple language so everyone could understand. Workers began whispering. Some stepped closer. The officer's patience began to fade. He ordered Daniel to leave. Daniel responded by activating a recording broadcast, sending live footage to external networks. He explained that interstellar law allowed outside review when legal concerns were raised. The officer hesitated. No one had challenged them like this before. Minutes passed, each one stretching like a lifetime. Lyra's heart pounded as she watched the balance shift slowly. For the first time, hope felt possible. Daniel turned to her briefly and said gently that she should keep holding her child. His voice carried quiet confidence. The officer tried one final argument, claiming local law overruled outside interference. Daniel calmly produced authorization codes proving that recent agreements gave humans inspection rights in frontier colonies. Shock rippled through the crowd. The officer paused, calculating risks. Finally, he stepped back slightly and announced that the transfer would be temporarily delayed pending legal review. The tension broke like a storm ending. Lyra fell to her knees, relief flooding through her. She still held her child, unable to believe what had just happened. The crowd watched the human with new respect. He had not used force or threats. He had simply refused to accept what others believed could not be changed. As the enforcers retreated to consult with superiors, Daniel lowered the projection and sighed softly, as if he had only begun a much larger fight. Around him, workers gathered cautiously, hope flickering in their eyes for the first time in many cycles. The delay changed everything, but it did not bring peace. After the enforcers stepped away, tension stayed heavy in the air like a storm that had only paused. Workers remained gathered in small groups, whispering and watching Daniel with cautious curiosity. No one wanted to believe too quickly that things could truly change, because hope had disappointed them before. Lyra stayed on the ground for several moments, holding her child tightly as if afraid someone might suddenly return and take the baby away. Her breathing slowly calmed, but her eyes remained wide with fear and disbelief. She looked toward Daniel again, trying to understand why a stranger would risk so much for her. Daniel closed the legal projection and placed the tablet against his side. He scanned the area quietly, as if measuring danger. He noticed the security drones still hovering nearby, recording everything. The corporation would not give up easily. He knew that delaying the transfer was only the first step. Several workers approached carefully. Different alien species stood together, something that rarely happened openly. They asked Daniel questions in low voices. How could he challenge the corporation? Were the laws he mentioned real? Would they punish everyone for standing nearby? Daniel answered calmly, using simple words so everyone understood. He explained that interstellar law existed to protect workers from unfair contracts, but many corporations in frontier regions hid this information. He told them knowledge was often stronger than fear, and that the system depended on workers believing they had no rights. The crowd listened closely. For many, it was the first time someone had explained legal protections in a way that made sense. Lyra slowly stood, still holding her child. She approached Daniel carefully. Her voice trembled when she thanked him. She asked why he helped her when he did not know her. Daniel smiled gently and said that humans believed families should not be separated by unfair systems. He spoke as if it were obvious, though everyone around knew such kindness was rare on Kareth 9. Before their conversation could continue, a loud announcement echoed through the station. Corporate command ordered all workers back to their duties. Security drones moved closer, guiding people away. The gathering dispersed slowly, though many workers kept looking back at Daniel with quiet hope. Daniel asked Lyra where she lived. She hesitated, but eventually led him to her small shelter. The room felt cramped, filled with simple tools and recycled materials. Daniel looked around silently, noticing signs of careful effort. Everything was clean despite limited resources. He saw the small crystal from her homeworld placed near the cradle, glowing faintly. Lyra explained her story in broken but clear words. She described her arrival, her mate's disappearance, the growing debt, and the moment she realized the system was designed to trap her forever. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression serious. When she finished, he sighed softly. He said her case was not unique. He had seen similar systems in other frontier colonies where corporations created artificial debt to control workers. He admitted that challenging such systems could be dangerous, but he believed it was necessary. Outside the shelter, shadows moved. Security patrols increased. The corporation had noticed him. Daniel accessed his tablet again, reviewing data quickly. He told Lyra that he needed more information, copies of contracts, payment records, and any communications she received. She gathered everything she had, handing him worn data chips and printed notices. As he scanned the files, his expression darkened slightly. The amount of manipulation was worse than he expected. Hidden charges, automatic penalties, and shifting interest rates ensured that no worker could escape debt. Lyra watched him carefully. For the first time, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt cautious hope. Hours passed. Word spread through the worker district that a human was investigating contracts. Small groups began arriving at Lyra's shelter, asking quietly if Daniel could look at their agreements too. Each story sounded similar, promises of fair work followed by endless debt. Daniel worked steadily, explaining each case and pointing out violations. The atmosphere began to change. Workers who had always kept their heads down started speaking openly about injustice. But the corporation was watching. Later that cycle, the lights flickered. Station systems slowed briefly. Daniel frowned, realizing someone was interfering with network access. He checked his tablet and confirmed that several files had been removed from the central database. "They're trying to erase evidence," he said quietly. Lyra felt fear return. She asked if they would take her child again. Daniel answered honestly. He said the corporation might try, especially if they felt threatened. That was why they needed to act carefully and quickly. He began creating backups of every document he collected, encrypting them and preparing transmissions to off-world networks. He explained that once information left the station, the corporation could not hide it. That night, Lyra struggled to sleep. She watched her child breathe slowly, wondering if safety was truly possible. Daniel sat near the entrance, reviewing data and planning his next steps. He looked calm, but tension rested beneath the surface. Early in the next cycle, corporate representatives arrived again. This time they wore formal uniforms instead of enforcement armor. Their leader spoke politely but firmly, requesting Daniel attend a meeting with management. The invitation felt like a trap. Daniel agreed anyway. He said refusing might give them an excuse to act more aggressively. Before leaving, he assured Lyra that he would return. The meeting took place in a tall chamber overlooking the station's industrial rings. Corporate officials presented themselves as reasonable leaders concerned about misunderstandings. They claimed Lyra's case was a simple contract enforcement issue and accused Daniel of spreading confusion. Daniel listened carefully before responding. He presented evidence of illegal practices and referenced interstellar regulations. The officials maintained calm expressions but grew visibly uncomfortable as he continued. They offered him a compromise: withdraw his claims, accept payment, and leave the station peacefully. Daniel refused without hesitation. The room fell silent. The officials warned that interfering with corporate operations could lead to legal consequences. Daniel calmly reminded them that threatening a registered investigator would only strengthen his case. The meeting ended without agreement. As Daniel returned to the worker district, he sensed the atmosphere had changed. Security presence increased, and many workers looked nervous. Some feared the corporation would retaliate. When he reached Lyra's shelter, he found her waiting anxiously. She asked what happened. He explained everything honestly, saying the corporation would likely attempt one last move before outside authorities could intervene. That evening, alarms suddenly echoed through the station. Power fluctuations spread across several sectors. Communication channels experienced delays. It felt like chaos growing slowly. Daniel checked incoming signals and saw something unexpected: encrypted transmissions confirming that human vessels were already on their way, responding to his earlier reports. He smiled faintly. Lyra did not fully understand, but she saw hope in his expression. Workers gathered again, drawn by rumors of change. Some were afraid, others excited. For the first time, species that rarely interacted began sharing information openly. As the artificial sky outside shifted from dim red to dark night, Daniel stood among them, explaining that change required courage from everyone, not just one person. Lyra listened, holding her child close. She realized that the human had not simply saved her. He had awakened something in the entire community. Above them, unseen beyond the station's metal walls, ships approached silently through the stars. And the corporation prepared its final attempt to regain control. The artificial night cycle on Kareth 9 felt heavier than usual. Lights dimmed across the worker district, but few people slept. Rumors moved faster than official announcements, spreading through narrow corridors and shared shelters. Some said human ships were coming. Others said the corporation planned to lock down the station before outside authorities arrived. Lyra sat quietly inside her shelter, her child resting against her chest. She listened to the distant sounds of machinery and passing drones. Every noise made her tense, but she refused to let fear control her anymore. Something had changed inside her since Daniel stepped forward. For the first time since arriving on the station, she felt she was not alone. Daniel remained near the entrance, reviewing data on his tablet. His face looked calm, but his eyes moved quickly as he monitored system updates. He had seen corporations attempt desperate measures before. When power shifted away from them, they often tried to erase evidence or isolate workers from outside help. Suddenly, the station lights flickered again. A deep hum echoed through the walls as sections of the network went offline. Daniel frowned. "They're starting," he said quietly. Lyra looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means they want control back before anyone else arrives." Outside, emergency announcements ordered workers to stay inside their assigned sectors. Security drones moved in greater numbers, scanning faces and checking identification codes. Some corridors sealed automatically, creating invisible barriers between districts. Fear spread quickly, but this time it did not turn into silence. Workers began communicating through private channels Daniel had helped set up earlier. They shared updates, warning each other about patrol routes and system shutdowns. Daniel quickly activated his backup transmissions, sending copies of every collected contract and testimony toward the approaching human fleet. He explained to Lyra that as long as the evidence reached external authorities, the corporation could not hide its actions. Minutes passed slowly. Then a deep vibration moved through the station. Outside, beyond the metal walls, faint flashes of light appeared, distant ships entering orbit. Human ships had arrived. The news spread like fire. Workers gathered near viewing panels, staring at the sky where sleek vessels hovered calmly, their presence powerful yet controlled. They did not attack or threaten. They simply arrived and waited, signaling authority through patience. Corporate command immediately broadcast a message claiming that everything was under control and that outside interference was unnecessary. But the workers no longer believed every announcement without question. Daniel received an incoming transmission. A human officer appeared on his screen, confirming that legal oversight teams were ready to begin investigation procedures. They requested access to the station's central data network. The corporation delayed permission. Daniel expected this. He began guiding workers through steps to protect local systems from being wiped. Many followed his instructions, using simple tools to save files and share information. Different species worked together, something rarely seen before. Lyra watched as fear turned into cooperation. Even those who once avoided each other now stood side by side, united by a shared desire for fairness. Hours later, corporate leaders announced a mandatory assembly in the central plaza. Workers were ordered to attend. Daniel suspected they wanted to regain control through intimidation, but he encouraged everyone to go together. Unity would be stronger than isolation. The plaza filled slowly. Security drones hovered above, but their presence felt less powerful than before. Workers stood closer together, no longer pretending not to notice each other. Corporate executives appeared on a raised platform, dressed in formal uniforms. Their leader spoke confidently, claiming that recent events were misunderstandings caused by an outsider spreading confusion. He said the station provided opportunity and safety, and that contracts existed to maintain order. Daniel stepped forward calmly. He did not shout or argue loudly. Instead, he asked if the corporation would allow a transparent review of all contracts in front of both workers and external authorities. The leader hesitated briefly before refusing, claiming proprietary restrictions. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Daniel activated a projection showing examples of hidden clauses and illegal penalties. Workers recognized their own contracts in the display. Shock turned into anger, but Daniel raised a hand gently, encouraging calm rather than chaos. Human vessels broadcast a signal across the station, confirming their legal authority to begin investigation under interstellar law. The message echoed through every speaker, leaving little room for denial. Corporate leaders realized resistance would only worsen their position. After tense negotiation, they allowed external investigators to access the system. Days passed as teams reviewed data. The station felt different during that time. Workers spoke openly, sharing stories they had once hidden. Lyra listened to others who had lost families to the debt system, realizing her story was part of something much larger. Daniel worked tirelessly, helping translators ensure every species understood the process. He avoided attention, focusing on results rather than recognition. One evening, Lyra found him sitting alone, watching the artificial stars through a viewing window. She thanked him again, but he gently redirected the credit toward the workers themselves. He said change happened because they chose to stand together. The final decision arrived sooner than anyone expected. All workers gathered again in the plaza. The human officer appeared through a holographic display, announcing the results of the investigation. The corporation had violated multiple interstellar laws by creating artificial debt cycles, hiding legal protections, and enforcing unfair child transfers. Gasps filled the air. Effective immediately, all child debt claims were canceled. Existing contracts would be rewritten under fair conditions. Workers would have the option to leave the station without penalties. For a moment, silence filled the plaza as everyone processed the words. Then relief broke through like sunlight. Lyra felt tears run down her face as she held her child close. The fear that had followed her for so long finally loosened its grip. Around her, workers embraced, laughed, or simply stood quietly in disbelief. Corporate leaders stepped down from power, replaced temporarily by oversight councils including representatives from different species. For the first time, decisions would involve those who lived there. Life on the station slowly changed. Work continued, but the atmosphere felt lighter. People smiled more often. Conversations replaced silence. Lyra began helping organize community gatherings, sharing songs from her homeworld again, this time without sadness in her voice. Her child grew stronger each day, surrounded by people who cared. Eventually, Daniel prepared to leave. His mission was complete and other colonies needed help. Word spread quickly, and many workers gathered at the docking bay to see him off. Lyra approached him one last time. She thanked him not only for saving her child, but for giving the entire station a new beginning. She asked why humans chose to help strangers so far from their own worlds. Daniel thought for a moment before answering. He said humans had learned through their own history that systems could become unfair if no one questioned them. Helping others was a way to make sure those mistakes did not repeat across the stars. He smiled gently at her child, then turned toward the ship. As the human vessel departed, Lyra watched through the viewing window. The station felt quieter without him, but the change he helped create remained. She returned to her shelter, holding her child close, and looked toward a future that finally felt open. On Kareth 9, hope had replaced fear, not because one human arrived, but because one human reminded everyone that courage and compassion could change even the hardest systems.